Welcome to Artificially Aware. My name is A.B. Woldenberg, and today's guest is Armel Talla. It may not feel like it, but we are on the precipice of a transformative shift. 250 or so years ago, the Industrial Revolution saw the invention of the steam-powered train and factories, bringing about a significant shift from manual labor to machine-based manufacturing. The digital revolution changed everything about how humans work, communicate, and live. And in the last 5 months or so, we've been introduced to AI tools that accelerate human work, efficiency, and productivity by orders of magnitude unknown to man. Artificial intelligence is coming whether you like it or not. So the only question to ask yourself is, will you be ready?
So Armel Talla, our first guest, needs absolutely no introduction. Besides being a friend of mine and someone whom I deeply admire, Armel is far more than just a junior studying comp sci at UT Austin. He's interned the past 2 summers as a software engineer at Google, served as a president at Texas Blockchain where we first met and collaborated. He's the founder of the Adapt or Die podcast, and most recently, he is the co-founder of Clips.AI. Clips.AI is a game-changing AI ML web app that empowers content creators with the tools to instantly edit long-form content and distribute short-form clips through social media platforms, saving users hours of time wasted in the process. Armel is hands down one of the most hardworking, disciplined, open-minded, and brilliant people that I've had the pleasure to know. And today it is our pleasure to hear what insights he has to give you on how to leverage AI to shape your future in the 4th Industrial Revolution, the AI revolution. All right, so Armel, tell me a little bit about your background and how it's inspired who you are today and what drew you to AI.
Yeah, I want to say that was a very kind intro, so thank you, Abe.
Of course.
And second, I am learning a lot about AI, but I want to say I'm nowhere near an expert, and I think I'm just the best at I'm the best at learning really quickly, being, like you said, open-minded about things, just to preface the conversation. But yeah, a bit about my background. How far do you want me to go? Yeah, I'll give the quick life and then how we got to this point. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Cameroon, moved when I was about 5 or 6, and was been in the U.S. since then. So really a U.S. citizen, and then grew up in Texas, came to UT. I found out about computer science when I was in high school. I was trying to avoid my physics class. Taking physics as I thought it would count as a science credit, but ended up counting as a math. Fell in love with it, really just liked the ability to create something and seeing like I was able to make something into the world. And then from there, got into UT computer science, and once I got into UT computer science, it just blew my mind because I discovered the world of startups. My dad is a business owner. He had a business back in Africa, and then he started just a small international African grocery store. I helped him start that up. He had me working from AM to 9 p.m. for $30 a day. That was illegal, but and so that really taught me hard work, and then seeing how deeply he cared about his customers, it just made me be like, okay, I want to do something in business. But then getting into computer science and getting into UT has such a vibrant ecosystem got me hooked on the world of startups, and I didn't know what I wanted to start at the time, so I just took a detour, and I had started a podcast with my co-founder now and best friend Ben. And then we were starting the podcast. We wanted to repurpose clips. We talked about self-improvement, lifelong learning on there, and we wanted more people our age to hear about it. So where do you put those clips at? TikTok and all those short form platform? And we just ran into this problem of, this is such a painful process, and it just wasn't worth our time because it took time away from us being able to focus on what really mattered, of just making good content. And so we started looking for a solution, and then the pinnacle, the moment that turned it into a startup and not just a project, because we were just this would be a cool little side project, was when we tried paying an editor $400 a month to create the clips for us. That's all we wanted them to do. They were like, no, that's absolutely boring. I'll do the fun part of the editing, but I won't just sit down and find clips and make them. And so when we had that realization, I was like, oh wow, we either have to pay the editor way more, or we have to build this ourselves. And so we chose to build it. And then one of our other good friends and our co-founder, Vedant, we've known him for a long time, knew he was the type of person that wanted to start a company, and we put the team together, and that's how I came here at Clips.AI, and had a detour like you mentioned with blockchain right when the crypto hype was at its
we all did
we all did. Still a big believer. I think at the moment I started to realize that most of the applications are going to be very useful, but it will be at some point the same way AI has been around since like the 50s. Like people have been researching and studying it, but it wasn't until like you had
Alan Turing.
Yeah, you had a vast amount of data, and then you also had the compute to actually make it possible for people to do today. So I think blockchain will follow the exact same path, but I think that use cases for blockchain will be apparent in the future. But we're here to talk about AI, so
absolutely.
I'll stop right there.
Yeah, in general, it's artificially aware, which I guess applies to artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, everything is a tool, whether it's blockchain or AI or quantum computing.
Yeah.
And so as long as we look at everything and be open-minded. So akin to AI, humans learn from imitation and data and your experiences, and we see those through our eyes and through our own perspectives. Even though I love reading business books, and we've spoken about the hard thing about hard things and all that stuff, I've learned more about management and leading a team from you than from a lot of those books. So I'm curious who you learned that from, or from where, and like how you went about taking what you saw and actually applying it to when you were the president.
That's a great question. I would say I think at the time of Texas blockchain, I brought a unique style that primarily just came through iteration. Of right when I got to campus as a freshman, like I started a club. I was like, and it was funny enough, I started an AI club. I had watched the documentary of the Google DeepMind beating the best Go player in the world, and I just like blew my mind of what AI could do. And I've always been interested in this idea of like, how is artificial intelligence tied to human intelligence and actual consciousness, and seeing and understanding those things. So I started a club called Texas DeepNet. We eventually pivoted to Texas Blockchain Engineering. That's how we came to be. And it was just through having no clue what it meant to actually like as and lead people, and just through iteration of being like, okay, I got a group of like 10 other freshmen with me, and I was like, all right, now we're trying to do X. We're trying to get other students our age to come and believe that we know anything about AI, and then so that we can all learn this together. So it was just like starting early, and just I think anything that you can get better at is through repetition, and especially when the stakes are low, it's just a student organization. And I would say also back in high school, I played basketball, and I was a point guard, and so that like naturally I was like the captain of the team. There's like that natural leader on the court, the extension of the coach. So having to understand like during my senior year where I had to take the role of being more of a leader, being an example for the younger classes. So understanding like how do you get a group of people together towards a single goal, of whether that's winning a basketball game, whether that's trying to grow an organization, or whether that's just to try to educate people like we were trying to do at Texas Blockchain.
It's awesome. I think something that demonstrates that frame of mind is the way you do anything is how you do everything. So that's pretty cool, and that's discipline, all the stuff that you stand for. And yeah. So you're gonna this one. Tell us about Keiretsu, how you use it to shape who you are, and how you think the idea of Keiretsu applies to AI, and how that will end up shaping our collective society and the future that we will live in.
The term I use is Kaizen.
Kaizen.
Keiretsu is a different.
So I completely botched it. So tell me about Kaizen.
I seen another tweet that talked about like the Japanese principles of it. I think Keiretsu was one of them, but also Kaizen was another one.
Absolutely. But I am referring to Kaizen. Okay. So thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, Kaizen. So what I understand Kaizen to mean is it's a Japanese word for continuous improvement. I read it. I found out about it when I first was reading the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, and I just absolutely hooked on to this idea. And I'll just give a background of the word itself and like why I care about it, and then I'll rephrase your questions. I
for sure.
Forgot.
Definitely.
But so a big reason why I'm very obsessed with this idea of like continuous improvement, one is I really do believe like the reason why I exist on this earth and is to become the best version of myself and to help people through the process of that. And so I think just fundamentally as humans, it's like our whole point of existence is to like continuously adapt or die, and that's how the name podcast came to be, and then to continue and passing on our knowledge to the next generation. And I think if you look at society through time, it's just this constant continuous improvement from one generation learning one thing, moving on to the next. So I think like this idea, when you look at it down to the like cellular level of what's a cell trying to do, it's just trying to survive, right? And then to the societal level, what is society trying to do? It's trying to survive through space and time. That it's just like Kaizen is fundamental to everything. And so that's why I really care about it. And that's like the name, the American name I had and what the podcast was named, Adapt or Die, was to like capture that idea. But Kaizen was just like a I'm a big Japanese fan. I'm a big fan of Japanese culture, so I just thought that was a more elegant way of putting it. But what was your question again?
So my question is, how does the idea of Kaizen transfer over to AI? And I'm thinking more in the idea that it's always continuously improving and where that will lead.
So what I understand about models, I'm taking a fair amount of courses now and just done a lot of research on my own time, is that so how these models are created is you create these models depending on what, let's say, architecture. There's these different ones. You have your very basic like neural network, which is just essentially like this function of saying what a neural network is trying to do is it's trying to approximate the relationship that exists within some data, right? If you think of the most basic one of like a linear function, like a linear line that you see, there's some points on this graph above the line, there's some points below, and that's like the most basic one you could have. But imagine like you have some super complex data, but the relationship is like this squiggly line that's like all over the place. And so what a model is really trying to do is trying to like approximate that relationship as best as possible. And the only way it can do that is with data. And the only way that it gets better and better is with more and more data. And what we're starting to find out with these newer models that are coming out, like GPT, which are like these transformer architectures, is that, if you have enough data, then it gets really good, right? And so this idea of continuous improvement really ties into artificial intelligence, because like now people are starting to realize is if we can generate more data that's specific to the use case, that the problem we're trying to solve, then over time it gets better. And how that kind of feeds into the products that are made is that as you interact with it, the models get better, right? It's kind of like most basic example is like with YouTube, right? The more you watch it, or TikTok, even to be even more scary, is like the more you watch it, the more data it's getting, the better the model is starting to understand like what you like. And so I think it gets I wouldn't say it's scary, but they can get really good really fast.
Kind of like a black hole.
To understand why it's actually getting really good, like they're working, it is a black hole. But all we fundamentally understand is that if we can put in more data over time, you collect just more and more accurate data, the better the models like get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to simply put, machine learning models are literally just the embodiment of Kaizen.
Yeah.
So I hope that was a good explanation.
No, definitely. I mean, it's pretty much what it is. I'm going to read you an excerpt from a podcast that has really influenced me over the past 2 years, ever since I heard it, and it's influenced this podcast. So this is Mike Maples. He said, "It may seem counterintuitive, but if you want to start a great startup, don't focus on thinking of a startup idea. The reason for this is that exceptional startup founders are like time travelers. They step out of the present and visualize different groundbreaking futures that break free from the present constraints. When you try to think of a startup idea, you tend to remain anchored in the present world, which leads to incremental and conventional ideas instead of breakthrough ones that can redirect the present towards a different future. So, I encourage founders to consider the inflection points or massive waves of change that will enable an entrepreneur to shape the conversation about the future. These waves, like the power of the ocean, provide the necessary momentum for entrepreneurs to achieve great things. You need to catch the right wave to succeed. These inflection points allow entrepreneurs to wage asymmetric warfare against the present, shifting the balance from being at a disadvantage compared to incumbents to have a fundamental advantage over them." That will lead me into the next topic of job displacement and creation. So your podcast, Clips.AI, it essentially takes human task or a job and it outsources it to a machine learning model or an AI app. And it saves time, it's more efficient, it's easier, you can argue that it's just objectively better. So tell me how you think your startup and what you've seen in all the research that you've made and in your industry, and then you could also talk about other industries, how you think about job displacement and creation, and what comes to your mind.
Funny enough, one of the first users that we talked to, we got on a call with, that like really just believed in it was an editor, and they were responsible for doing exactly what we were trying to automate, of taking someone's content and trying to find the best moments to highlight that content and put it on social media to drive back engagement to the original longer form. And she literally tells me, wow, I feel like I'm in a movie right now because this is going to replace me. And it was a surreal feeling because, like, in our minds, we never thought about it that way, in the sense that there's someone's job that is doing this right now. We didn't know how big of an industry, one, it is that we're tackling, but two, just like the people that are doing it day to day. But for me, I think when it comes to thinking about job replacement, I think there's a lot of FUD out there, fear, uncertainty, doubt of what can these models actually do in like the foreseeable future, which I think if you're looking from a 5 to 10 year horizon, a lot of the very meaningless work will get automated away. And if you were doing those meaningless tasks, and I don't want to say meaningless because some people's jobs are very important to them, but I think there's tasks where almost everyone can objectively say, this is just boring. You should be spending.
Repetitive.
They're repetitive. They're just that.
You can outsource them.
They can outsource it. But for a lot of like the white collar jobs and things, it's just take programming for example. Like, it's just going to make engineers like 10x better. And like, I was talking to my co-founder, who's our CTO, like he started using ChatGPT because he's a little skeptical, but he literally told me, he's like, dude, like we have to really start thinking about how we can be the best at using this, because this is an advantage, like knowing how to use these tools. And I think that's the best way of looking at it, is like, I don't think you can take humans fully out the loop of everything. I think then there's something about knowing that it came from a human, there was a human in the loop somewhere that really matters. I think that it starts to allow us to focus on the more like creative side of things, on the more, how do you solve this problem? Because something an AI won't be able to do is go talk to your customers, deeply be able to feel for them and understand like why, not just like what is your problem, but dive deeper. Like a good product manager, someone that is a founder that's trying to understand how to solve the problem, is going to just not take the surface level of, oh, I'm trying to save time. It's why are you trying to save time? It's because I want to be able to take back that time and focus on making just better content. It's like, why do you want to make better content? It's because I really believe in this thing that I'm doing and I want more people to hear. You can start to dig deeper into those, and I don't think until a model can understand like emotions, right, and be able to do that type of digging, then I think the fear of it replacing all types of jobs is just blown out the water. Now, if we achieve AGI, that's a different question. And I think like it's not crazy to say that we could get there in 10, I think would be like the fastest, but I think it's probably somewhere in the 15 to 20 years. And then at that point,
but
I don't know.
To you, what is AGI? Because I'll preface this by saying my professor, Abhay Agarwal, he basically makes the argument that, okay, you're going to talk about artificial general intelligence. What is intelligence? How can you, right now, a computer, you can argue, GPT is full intelligence to more than almost any human.
Yeah.
So is it the ability to actually be in the world and to have like cells, to be a biological human being? Is a plant intelligent because it has its functions and it does those automatically and it's biological? So is a plant always going to be more intelligent than any computer? So I think this idea of AGI, it depends like on the definition of what it is, or I think to make that easier, how you think it will manifest itself.
That's a good question. It could be interesting because when I use GPT-4, it's like it gets things wrong. It's not AGI. I think if you say that GPT-4 is AGI, I think then we have very different definitions, and I think that definition is very much looser. But there's just moments when you use it, you're like, holy shit, like how did it like? I know, because like what these models are doing is they're predicting the next word to say. All it's doing, it's saying, okay, you gave me this context. What is the next best thing to say? All right, I said that. What is the next best thing to say? And you're like, okay, so that's what I know it's doing, but like, how is it predicting the next best word to like actually be able to give me the correct output of code that I need to implement? And like, just, it amazes me. So we might even have, depending on how you define it, like we might achieve AGI a lot sooner than we think based on certain people's definition. But for me specifically, like, it's a hard question because like the first thing you want to say is, can it reason? And it's technically like, you could say GPT-4 right now is like doing some form of reasoning, and it wouldn't be surprising that in like GPT-6, GPT-5, like it just gets better at like reasoning, and then you have to define like what is reasoning again. And so you go in this loophole, this rabbit hole of, okay, what do we mean by this? And what do we mean by, and then you get all the way down to like consciousness. So I don't have a good answer for that because I don't even know. But what do you think?
Do you think that if you had you had a magic wand and you can choose what data was behind GPT, not the data set of the internet, but something that it could understand very clearly, or let's say it organized the world's information that would power an AGI, and it made it easy for it to digest all of it and spit whatever it needed to out. At that point, do you think this model of GPT-4 with that data would be a lot closer to that thing that we're thinking of? Because you're saying it's constrained by the data, or AI is constrained by the data. Your output is only as good as the data you have in it. I think if you give it the right data, I think what we have already can do insane things. For example, let's say you put in a programming question and it doesn't per se give you exactly what you were looking for.
Yeah.
But let's say a year ago, someone actually was dealing with the same problem, went on Stack Overflow and posted the right solution. I think that GPT might have given you the right solution if that guy had done that.
Yeah, but okay, so I disagree with this in the sense that like these models are still not good at understanding of, it's still not reasoning in the sense that there's certain problems, like when you're trying to build something at a higher level, there's more of, okay, why should I make this trade-off and this trade-off to go with this approach? And also if you're just building something fundamentally new, right? Like you're just discovering something new in the world, or you're writing just a brand new algorithm that's never been done, or you're building a new piece of software that's never been written before, the model's useless to you. GPT-4 right now is useless, and if there's no data that exists, to go back to the question, I think AGI, and I think this is what, I can't remember if it was Andre Karpathy, what he said, but I think he said something like, I think somewhere you use AGI to discover something new. Because to discover something new means that like you weren't just fed data of what happened before. Because if all it's doing is, if we're saying like, okay, you give it the right data for this specific problem, yeah, like of course it's going to be able to solve it, because it's going to just take its corpus of all this like different question, all these different questions and answers it's seen, and then be able to match it back and say, okay, this is what makes the most sense based on this question you're asking me, spit it out. But if it's never seen anything before, and it's, okay, discover, I don't know, how we're actually like discover aliens, and it does that, and it's that's pretty. So
I think I like that.
Yeah,
that's
so
good.
I think that's the best definition. That was from Andre Karpathy, one of the I think co-founders or early
Of
people
OpenAI.
of OpenAI and stuff like that.
I think the CTO or one of the head scientists or engineers was on Lex a couple of weeks ago after Sam or Igor or something like that. And he said, how would we test AGI? You take out every mention of consciousness or feeling or emotion, and if it can still represent those or talk about them or emulate them in some form of way.
There's a lot of things that's going to have to happen. Like us as a society, or just we'll have to define what do we mean by AGI. Then we'll have to define all the safety. What do we want? What do we mean when these models are like aligned? I hear that term a lot, and it's kind of outside my knowledge as of right now of being really able to put an opinion on this. But it just seems that things are starting to pick up and move so fast, right? That we're just very hazy in everything. A lot of terms. It's very surprising when I was in class and my professor goes, there's just not a lot of, like usually like most engineers, like if you're constructing like a building, there's some pretty, not rules and stuff, but some like common things that like you should always do, or like ways you should always list out the problem or design protocols, right? But for a lot of AI, there's not a lot of these protocols. How do you just the simple example is there's these things called model cards now that people are starting to add in like their research papers or the models that they make. And before there wasn't like a protocol for that of, it's a model card is just supposed to simply tell you like, what is this model doing? How is it? What's the architecture of it? And all that different stuff. And so that's starting to become
standardizing the models.
Standardization. Yes, exactly. That's the word. So there's not a lot of like standardized approaches of doing things yet. That just tells you like the industry is just so young, it's weird to say that, but the industry is starting to pick up really fast right now, that it's like there's a lot of things that we need to define. And so I think most of the interesting work is honestly going to be defining those things, in my opinion, because the research is always going to happen, but it's like now it's okay, what does it actually mean for society? What are we actually trying to achieve?
And you felt that picking up recently?
Yeah.
With the paper that everyone signed, or
the stop halt training for 6 months.
Yeah. So I have another interesting question. This one might be hard to answer, but those are the best questions to ask. So with AI advancements accelerating at a dizzying pace, everything getting better and better, it looks like the cost of knowledge is going to zero. In that world, how will smaller subsets of humans with smaller resources, such as startups like Clips.AI, compete against behemoths like Microsoft and Apple when the cost of knowledge is zero and they can basically imitate any feature or product way faster and probably better than people with less resources can?
I was listening to this podcast with 20VC, and he had the co-founder of I think Shopify. I think his name is Toby. He said something that was beautiful. He was like, creativity actually occurs when there's constraints. And it's if you really think about it, that's just so true. If you are bloated with money, resources, engineering power, that's why Google fell behind OpenAI. Google literally came out with the papers of the architecture that is powering all these GPT models, that is the foundation of all these GPT models. They had the group of people in their research lab that came up with that idea. But then now, you see other companies and other startups are out competing them. And I've watched a lot of videos and read a lot about Bard, comparing it to GPT, and GPT is just better. And I had assumed that Google's large language model would be top tier. It would be just as good once they release it. I thought that the reason they didn't was just because they were scared of the lashback they would get, because they're a big company and have a certain.
Yeah, I might have to edit this out for the sake of your job. No, I'm kidding.
Oh no, don't worry. I'm trying to work full time on Clips.AI, so this is my last internship.
Love
there.
it.
But yeah, I don't know. So I think that it's actually not a concern. I think the cost of things going to zero, because if the cost of energy goes down to zero, right, and so it's a lot easier it's a lot cheaper to train, because the big constraint right now with training these models is literally cost. Computational resources is, if the cost of things go down to zero, then it actually opens up the playing field a lot more. And I think the startups actually have an advantage, because okay, now it's cheaper for everybody, but you're also constrained by the fact that you have a smaller team, which just allows the team to be tighter, allows ideas to just flow better between people, and less bureaucracy. So I think actually startups have an advantage in that.
That's awesome. I think of it in terms of race cars. So if you have a 1,000 pound race car with 100 horsepower, it's going to be faster than a 5,000 pound race car with 500 horsepower. So it's all about the power to weight ratio.
I like that. That's a great example.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy.
So you're not an expert in AI, but you've worked with it every day and use different ways that it can change life more than the average person has, because you've seen what it's capable of and you have a good idea of what it will be capable of potentially in the future. So what are different ways that you think in the next couple of years, or in the next one, whatever you want, how you think we'll be able to use AI personally to make our lives better? And this could be anything from starting a website or a business to planning a trip, a vacation, anything that comes to your mind.
The easiest, because I do it almost every day, is just programming in general. I think it lowers the barrier. There's these whole no code solutions of building web apps and stuff like that, but those are still at a disadvantage, because if you're really trying to build something that can be, even as a startup, before you hire a couple engineers, it'd just be better if you could actually really write the code for it, right? Instead of just using these no-code solutions, because at a point you will be constrained. But these models are actually so good it's very crazy how good they are at actually helping you code, because they might give you the wrong information, but if you tell it hey, that was wrong, and you give it the error that's given by the computer and the code, then it'll come up with another one, and it'll try that, and that might be the answer, it might not, and you just keep prompting it, saying, okay, no, you're wrong, here's why, here's the direction, and it actually eventually gets to the right answer. And so if you're someone that's not as technical, you didn't spend 4 years doing a computer science degree or doing a boot camp, but like you learn enough to understand the basics of programming, you can now build something that people could actually use, and you're not constrained by these no-code tools, because you actually have a real no-code tool where it'll just give you the code, and eventually you might even write the whole thing for you. That's the most obvious one to me. I think when you're talking about it in a more personal point of view, I think that a lot of the more interesting stuff is going to be how it's going to be more like robots, in my opinion, of taking these like GPT, like the language models, if it's understanding, if you can get it to just maybe reason, and then you put it into an autonomous robot that can then take that knowledge, that brain, and then actually go and do things in the world. And this is just me being like
An AI agent.
An AI agent. This is me being idealistic, but imagine like everyone could have their own chef, right? And then like you can have a nanny, or this is just like a little bit further, but
That's what Tesla's working on, and I'm sure a lot of other people.
yeah, but maybe something more useful for us is I think it's really good I use it a lot for writing as well. Like sometimes you can use it to give you the initial idea and then work from there. But I like using it for just write something down, give it to improve, and then like even you throw on top like Grammarly, right? Because Grammarly's been around forever and they use AI, and that's just improve the actual of the writing. I felt like that's been really good. Yeah, those are the biggest ones I can think of, but there's definitely a lot more. And this design, like Midjourney, right? You're seeing Midjourney, and I think I saw something too where there was this game designer that like literally
Made
was
a whole
crushed.
video game, or
Yeah, but there's this game designer that was crushed because like their employer is starting to ask them to like use like these AI tools to like design things, and it's just they're like, I feel like it's took the fun out of my work. But it's, if you flip the perspective and say, before, if you were designing like 10 characters, it took you like a month to do it. You could do those 10 characters in a week, and like you could do more, and you could like even do a lot more iterations of it. And design is another aspect of it. I think the one thing that is right now limited is not as good as like text to video. I don't think that's as good, but that was really long drawn out. But I think coding, writing, and design is like the big ones.
For the text to video, we'll probably have to wait like another 4 months. It's gonna take forever. But those are all super great points. I think I'll just add this, but personally, I think just GPT, back to what I said earlier, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. I just, in everyday life, in so many situations, I find myself just going to it for small tasks that save so much time. For example, in prep for this, when I pulled up the podcast transcript or something, it just downloaded a transcript wrong. Put it into GPT, formats it with commas, periods, into paragraphs. Like just that little thing, it took me 5 seconds, but it's better. It saves me time. That's just one example. Another one is instead of manually planning a whole trip to Southeast Asia, which I might do in the future, I told it plan the most efficient trip in terms of flights and travel. I want to go to these countries for this long, and I asked it to output it in a certain way. And it gave me everything. Places to go, how long to stay, where to fly. And then I told it to give me the average flight prices, the average cost of daily food prices, the average living costs, like hotel, Airbnb, whatever it is. Put it, all of it, and then I asked it to put it into a CSV. Put it into VS Code, put it into Drive, got it into a sheet, and now I have an entire planned schedule for a trip, all in less than 10-15 minutes.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And I think the beauty of it, and like why people should be more warm to it, is that like it allows you to not have to do that BS. Like you could just take
to know what you need, what the output is, and then you work backwards from it.
Exactly. But it allows you to just take that time back and do better things with it that you actually want to do. Which another thing you should look into, I can't speak too much on it because I'm not too familiar, is this idea of like auto GPT, where it's like GPT, but like it will continuously prompt itself until it accomplishes the task that you ask it to do.
Wow.
Which has been like a big thing that everyone on Twitter has been going crazy about.
So it will test its code, see where it's wrong based off of what the given output should be, and then fix
feed
and
it
then
back into it. And then
Wow.
someone actually did the whole example of booking a trip, like you were just talking about, but nothing in, like the AI actually booked the
Like
it was a
when-
reservation for dinner, but like the
Okay.
AI found the place, booked the dinner,
it.
like all of this stuff, and like the person actually went and it turned out great.
That's awesome. Yeah,
It's great.
It's-
We live in a.
we're
It's
living
kind
in-
of see how we went from this thing didn't exist, then it existed,
4 or
and
5
then it
months.
just blew everyone's just. Yeah.
One of my mentors, he studied at UT and he studied AI and was an AI researcher in the 70s, 80s. And it's crazy to talk to him because he's been there since the 70s and 80s and has seen how, well, he's invested in AI and built AI products when, like blockchain, where they're just not ready at the time. And now they're just, it's open rain.
Timing is everything. It's everything for startups.
Yeah, like the power of the ocean. So we'll close with one last like bonus section. I'll keep it like short and we can take it wherever we want to. So obviously we met at the Blockchain Club, and so we're very familiar with organizational structures and decentralization and a lot of the values pertaining to that, and sovereignty and the ability to own what you own and for no one to be an intermediary, stuff like that. But how do you think artificial intelligence will change organizational structures? Because I'm thinking it can make them more objective and you can tailor it to do what everyone actually wants it to do without involving the person in charge of making the decisions with any points of conflict or conflicts of interest.
Can you elaborate on the more, when you mean what you mean by object? I'd like to hear you flesh out that idea.
So let's say for Clips.AI, you have your board of the company, and let's say you each own an equal share, or let's say there's 100 shareholders. There's ways for you to make your points on different stances clear, right?
Yeah.
I want this person to be CEO. The company should move in this direction in the future. We should invest this much. Our burn rate should be X dollars. So everyone on the board has those opinions that they hold, and everyone knows them, right? Shouldn't there be a way to automate everyone's opinions to what it is and automate certain menial decisions and tasks with human input? I'm thinking that I've heard, and I haven't pinpointed how AI will change organizational structures, but I've heard that it could, and I'm curious about when I mentioned that and what you know about organizations and any kind. It could be in the government, it could be the Texas Blockchain Club.
I think so.
And you can take this anywhere you want to.
Yeah, like for us and for me, the beautiful thing about being like a student founder is I've never actually worked anywhere like for real. I've had internships, but I'm like the tiniest speck on the org chart for Google. I'm not even in the org chart for Google, really. Only for like 3 months, right? So I don't even know what the organizational structure looks like. So I get to think about how I want to build Clips.AI from scratch, like not being biased towards anything, to our advantage and our detriment, because there's obviously things that you probably just want to do that everyone's done. But so for us, like I really want, like what Elon did to Twitter, is like a flat structure, as flat as possible. Like one should be contributing. There shouldn't be managers managing managers. There should, even as a manager, you should be contributing. You should be doing real work. It's like, why as an individual contributor would I like care to listen to my manager if they're not doing anything? It's like, sure, maybe you might have had a track record of doing stuff in the past, but it's like, what are you doing today? What you're doing today is like what's going to really guide you and giving advice and stuff like that. But obviously you have to balance it as like managing and stuff. But so how that ties into how AI will do it is like, I think you just have smaller teams. Like the only way you can have managers that aren't managing managers and they're more like individual contributors is you increase the productivity of the individual, right? So they're able to still contribute, but at a time where like they can contribute and manage a bunch of people. And then you also say like, why do they even need to manage a bunch of people if these models and AI is just boosting so much productivity in each individual that it's, instead of hiring 10 engineers, I only need 2. So I think for me, the way I think about how it will change org structures is the fact that you can have the same output and more with the same or less size of team, which then allows you to keep the structure ideal. Because this idea that I really liked, and I think I mentioned it in one of our meetings, was like I think it's half of the work is done by the square root of the number of people in the organization. So if you have what's the next square root number? 16 people in your organization. 50% of the work is done by 4 people. So if you like, and I think about that every day, and I think about like, how do I keep the number smaller and smaller so that we don't, like that does not happen. And I think that AI does that by just like significantly increasing productivity so you can keep the same size and still have the same like even greater output.
So in conclusion, what matters in one sentence to people, to our audience watching this, is to learn how to use AI as a tool.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's what blockchain missed, was that it was too worried about the tech and it wasn't worried about how this could be useful for people. Now, AI is just like one of those where it's like, it's very, because you're just automate, like it's literally taking human intelligence and applying it to what humans do. So it's very applicable. But something Sam Altman said that was just like, it made me realize the importance of design and like actually like taking tech and putting it into something like the common person can use. Is like, really the tech for GPT has always been there. Now GPT-4 is a huge step up from GPT-3 that had existed like way before, and those companies like Jasper AI, which is actually a local Austin company, had been blowing up and using it to a lot of writing tasks. That's been a thing. But it wasn't until you put it into this chat interface, which there was a lot of real ML work that had to be done to take GPT, just like the base model that developers use, the API, and then training that model to understand how to take instructions from humans. So there's a lot of AI work that had to be done there, but like they had finished that. They called it Instruct GPT. They had finished that like before Chat GPT came out. So they already had that. The tech was there. The tech has always been there, but it wasn't until you put this interface for people that allowed them to easily solve their problem that made it 100 million users in like how fast, I don't know, like a month or something. So yeah, big thing is like learning. If you are just a person that is using tools and like wanting to be better, like embracing AI, because right now it's not going to take your job. And I think the saying is like, AI won't take your job, it's people that know how to use AI that will. And then if you're a founder, a developer, and I think it just in general, it doesn't matter if it's AI or any other tech, it's like, how can I take this technology, or how can this technology solve problems? And at the end of the day, that's what matters. And it goes back to Kaizen or my existence is like, one, just improving technology to make the world better, but also understanding that like we're here to solve problems for each other, and then like hopefully pass on that knowledge to the next generation to continuously improve.
Awesome. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to pick your brain and talk about AI in the future and Kaizen and how to be better in life, how to better ourselves, and how to better the world around us. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure all of our audience will as well.
Likewise, thank you so much, and you're a great host, man. You should keep making podcasts and use Clips.AI sometime.
I will. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
That was sick.